Welcome, everyone, to the inaugural Calgary Black Film Festival, founded by the Fabian Colas Foundation, co-presented by Global News, supported by Ministry of Culture, Multiculturalism, and Status of Women, Calgary Arts Development, and Calgary Economic Development. So if you all don't already know, the festival runs until Sunday, May 30th. So you can discover the program and grab your all access pass on calgaryblackfilm.com. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. My name is Tomia Jelly. I am the editor-in-chief of Afros in the City, which is a media collective dedicated to amplifying Black voices here in Calgary. And I will be your moderator for this exciting discussion this evening. Before we dive in, we would like to acknowledge the traditional territories and oral practices of the Blackfoot Nations, which includes the Siksika, the Piikani, and the Kainai. We also acknowledge the Tsuut'ina and Stoney Nakoda First Nations, the Métis Nation, and all people who make their homes on Treaty 7 region of Southern Alberta. So today's panel, as you know, is titled Diversity on and Off Screen. We're going to be talking to some wonderful industry professionals, which I'll introduce you to in a bit here, about the underrepresentation of Black talent on and off screen. This issue is so important because we can't begin to decentralize narratives or really have Black voices truly be heard until we increase the number of Black professionals working and thriving in television and film sets in our city. So I will introduce you to our panelists in a second here, but I do want to say that we'll be having a casual discussion in the beginning, and then we'll save about 10 minutes or so at the end for a question period. Having said that, please feel free to drop any questions you have in the Q&A box throughout the discussion, and we'll just try to address as many as we can throughout the conversation. So on to our panelists. Today, we have the pleasure of speaking with Jerome D Gorville, also known as Rome IX. Jerome D Gorville started out as a location sound operator and post-sound mixer, eventually trying his hand in other roles behind and in front of the camera. He was recently nominated for Best Overall Sound in the 2020 Stinger Awards for his work on The Narrator, directed by Darren Harmon, and worked on the feature The Great Fear, directed by Ian Laird. He wrote, directed, and produced his debut short film, Within, working alongside Garrick Winston as his co-producer and mentor. His diverse skills as a filmmaker as well as a musician have led him to work on projects for local Calgary artists such as Twizzy Ramos, IYE, and under his moniker, Rome IX. We also have with us today Mariah Braun. Mariah is a filmmaker and marketing professional from Northern Alberta. Mariah seeks to amplify the voices of underrepresented individuals and tell stories through a unique point of view. This has drawn her into short documentary filmmaking and producing commercial projects with an emotional tone. In 2019, Mariah was awarded a TELUS Story Hive grant to direct and produce her short film, Life Without Diagnosis. Mariah is currently the Vice President of the Peace Region Independent Media Arts Association Board, also known as PRIMA. PRIMA is a nonprofit society that supports and helps develop film and digital media artists throughout Northern Alberta and BC. And recently, Mariah was awarded her second Story Hive grant to produce her new short documentary film, Able, which is currently in production. We also have with us Omada Udalor, founder and director of Handcuffs Entertainment Incorporated. Omada's creative vision is to lead the charge in creating, telling, and empowering Black and diverse stories. With over 30 years as an actor, he brings years of experience in film, understanding the creative uniqueness and direction required in attaining these goals. He created and produced award-winning short films on the festival circuit, such as Texted, The Trial of Miss Mudimbe, and A Path to Somewhere, amongst a few others. Next, we have Mwabeni Indire. Mwabeni is a Los Angeles filmmaker in Calgary. He founded Indire Entertainment Incorporated and has produced videos for Sotheby's, Honda, BMW. Mwabeni is a Vancouver Film School graduate. And last but certainly not least, because it may or may not be her birthday today, we have Sarah Uwadini. Sarah Uwadini. Sarah is a Nigerian art maker based in Calgary, Alberta. She is a multidisciplinary creative with a passion for storytelling and artistic experimentation. She is an emerging filmmaker and a theater designer. Some theater design credits include Actually with Alberta Theater Projects, Sexy Laundry, A Christmas Story, A Chitenge Story, with Handsome Alice Theater, Crave, Metamorphosis, and Splendor with U of C Main Stage. She looks forward to a life of artistic creations and collaborations. So, wow, we just like, this talent is so stacked right now. This is very exciting. So welcome to all of our panelists. I'm so excited to have you all here. I've officially talked way too much, and I'm really excited to just start hearing from all of you. So I do want to start by saying I'll ask questions and I might call on you specifically, but please at any point, just jump in if you want to answer a question or if you want to respond to something that anybody has said. So let's get started. We have such diverse talent here, which is great. And a few of you have experience with being both behind the camera as well as in front of it. So as we talk about diversity on and off screen today, I want to start by getting your thoughts on the difference in representation that you may have seen in front of the camera versus behind it. Do you find there tends to be more or less representation on one side of the camera? Or would you say there's an equal lack of representation? Let's start with Omada. I know you have experience on both sides, so I'm curious to get your thoughts.
Why did I have a feeling I was going to go first?
I'm so sorry.
Oh yeah, that's good. That's good. I'm just kidding. Yeah, it's for me, I think it's pretty stacked on both sides. There's a very high lack of people of color and particularly Blacks in front and behind the cameras. I actually feel a bit more behind, and that does not tell, when I say that, I don't mean like we have people in high positions behind the cameras. We have gaffers, we have DOPs, which is pretty much as high as they kind of like get in terms of those who call the shots. So we don't really have that many producers, directors, and stuff like that behind the scenes. For actors in front of it, we are usually tokenized. So it's that one odd Black guy in the scene in the background, or the guard number 2 or something like that, right? So in my experience so far, it's been pretty heavy on sets with the lack of diversity on screen and behind the screen for me. And it just goes to show that this is actually a great time to have these discussions, because I always say that if you don't have those discussions, people just assume that's the norm and they keep on carrying on business as usual, right? So it's great to have these discussions and put these issues to the fore so that we can take steps in remedying them.
Mm-hmm. Jerome, how about you?
Yeah, I'd say there's definitely like a gap to be filled on both sides. You see a lot more in front because anyone who's looking for some kind of representation or the look that they want, it's a whole lot easier to go out and find someone that they can put into that role, as opposed to finding someone who is in the position to be behind the camera and bringing all those people there. It's a lot easier to just be like, hey, I need someone who fits this ethnicity or this stereotype or this dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
And even if they don't come to you looking to fill that role, it's, yeah, you can walk down the street and be like, hey, you look good on camera, so let's get you in front of the camera and stuff. So yeah, I haven't seen too many behind the camera.
Interesting. Mariah, how about you?
Yeah, I would say, there needs to be representation on both ends, like especially where I live, there's not a lot of Black creators in general in Northern Alberta. But I would have to agree that I think it's behind the camera that is the lesser, like there's less Black directors and producers, like you said. Yeah, I think it's something we definitely need to work on, and I think it's a matter of just being in those roles and like showing youth and other Black people that it is possible to be in those roles. So yeah, that's my perspective on it.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Sarah, how about you?
Yeah, I agree with what every single person here has already said. Like you find way more. I mean, you find way more Black people in front of the camera behind, and with how, you know, with the fact that there are not a lot of people in front of the camera, a lot of Black people in front of the camera, you can only imagine what behind the camera looks like, right? And I think that some of it does have to do with the stories being told. There are not a lot of Black stories being told, and so there doesn't seem to be a lot of Black, you know, actors to embody those stories sought after in front of the camera, and or, you know, like even Black storytellers. I think that the basis of it might be in the stories being told. And I think that, like, yes, 100%, like we need to like start showing people that there's more to filmmaking or storytelling than actor. There's director, there's, you know, cinematography, there's behind the scenes, you could be a designer, you could be all these different things. There needs to be, like, people need to be educated about the availability of positions that they could fill on a set, as well as stories being told. I think that there needs to be a new wave and a new like intentionality with regards to storytelling and people choosing to tell Black stories, and so that we can have people who understand Black stories behind the camera to, you know, tell the story through the lens with the actors embodying characters or the story.
Yeah, absolutely. Wabini, how about you? Do you have anything to add to that?
I agree with that. Everybody said, but I also think that, yes, while it's good to have diversity behind and in front of the camera, it should be sensible. You see, for example, in the 70s, coming out of the African rights era, some people call it civil rights era, coming out of the African rights era in the 60s, there was a certain rush of having Africans on TV and in movies, and that led to the Blaxploitation era. But then the characters you saw on there, most of them were either criminals, or they were on drugs, or they were prostitutes, or just lascivious people. So it should be sensible. If people are going to be in front of camera, they should have sensible roles that, you know, people can look to and be like, okay, I identify with that. That reminds me of my father or my mother or my sibling, you know, not just having people just for the sake of the way they look. That doesn't help one bit. I mean, we shouldn't be so surprised that in the 90s, you found there was a whole burst of violent music because people internalize what they see. And some saw what they saw in their neighborhoods, some saw what they saw on TV. And like it or not, TV, radios, and books, they all influence how we perceive ourselves and how people perceive us and how we perceive others.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And a few of you have touched on the issue of tokenism. And for a long time, that the issue of representation has been really mismanaged. And we're still seeing that today, with tokenism being that kind of go-to solution. So how have you either managed being tokenized yourself throughout your career or ensured that that doesn't take place? What have your experiences been with that? Let's start with Mariah.
It's really tough for me. I mean, I've lived in a northern community my entire life. I was born and raised in Grand Prairie, and you know, oftentimes I am the only Black person in a room, regardless of a crew on a set. Right? it's really tough because I feel I can feel isolated sometimes in different social situations. And for the most part, I think I've just worked hard, and I try and prove my worth, of course. And sometimes I feel like I overcompensate because I just feel like I want to have a voice at the table. But yeah, I think we do need to be careful about the tokenization of Black people. I want to be there because I have talent. I want to be there because it's important that I have a voice, and that I'm representing diversity, right? Not just checking a box. So yeah, that's what I would have to say about it.
Mm-hmm. How about you, Mobeni?
I would, in many places that I've been, I've tended to be the only person of African descent, like in many fields, whether I was working in a restaurant or whether I was working within the film industry. But, when I'm there, I choose to focus on doing my job and doing it well. I'm not here on this earth to make everybody happy, but I'm also not here to annoy people. So I just do my job, and we move along. We keep charting courses ahead. Because yes, sometimes I do think about like, what if I left this place that I'm working in, and let's say they encounter another person of my ancestry or my heritage, I always try to make sure that I leave a good impression. Because some people, just the way they grow up, they have never encountered or never worked with somebody of my ancestral background. So, and in some cases, that's how the world runs. So, but I just focus on doing a good job and doing it well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Sarah, how about you?
Just going off of what Benny said, I absolutely agree with what everyone has said. Like when you're in a room, even if the room is full of white people and you're the only Black person or person of color, you cannot afford to just take to heart that you are there. Like you just have to like do your work and do it well. And then what Benny mentioned something about like having to kind of carve the space for whoever comes after you. There kind of tends to be the pressure, depending on how you want to look at it. For some people, they just do not think about it. They just do their best and move on. But in some spaces, it's kind of hard not to. I have a theater background, and so I work a lot in theater, and a lot of the time, I'm the only Black person in the room. And sometimes that pressure is there, like of, oh God, like, am I in this moment representing every other Black human being on this planet? Like, I would say for me, the pressure is real. And just to like do your best, do the best that you can. And just think of it as work and prove your worth to them and make them look for you next time, as opposed to just seeking you out because of the color of your skin, but because of the value that you bring. And also, people have different ways that they manage like pressures that come with feeling like you are holding space for every single person that comes after you. So just finding a way to deal with that. If you have that pressure, not everyone does. But yeah.
Yeah, Sarah, you raise a really important point, and I want to circle back to that pressure piece because that is a huge part of that. So, but before we touch on that, I do want to hear from Jerome and Omada about your thoughts on tokenism and how you've managed that. So let's go to Jerome.
Yeah, that one's it's kind of a weird thing. Like as an actor, when I started acting was right around the same time that Hell on Wheels was wrapping up. But everyone I talked to was like, "Oh, you're perfect for Hell on Wheels. Like you'll get in whatever." And it's like, okay, but now Hell on Wheels is gone. What else is there for me?
Yeah.
And so having to sit around and wait for these stories where they are trying to fit us in. Mobeni touched on this a little bit, kind of the idea that there's two sides to this coin. You can go so far that you're just bringing people on for the sake of bringing them on to have that representation, as opposed to having the people there who can do the job, or giving the opportunity to people who can fit those kind of roles without having to check off certain boxes and stuff. And I think it was Predator, the movie Predator, when they were casting for that, they intentionally left a lot of the roles genderless. There was just a name to them. And so I think the character of Riley, I can't remember the actress's name right now, but you would think that it was like a guy, but she ended up getting this role because they left it very open. And so for me, I think that that's kind of what I see is that idea of trying to fit us in just because it's now the PC thing to do, as opposed to working with us to let us have an opportunity or open up the door to these other opportunities that are there regardless of our heritage or who we are, what we look like.
Yeah, that really highlights that sort of problematic nature of, for so long, that there's been that Black role, let's get this Black role filled, and kind of the burden of that. Omada, how about you?
Yeah, definitely. It's double-sided from both angles. From the acting perspective, there's really not much you can do except do your best and give the best that you can, so that they realize that you are not just that token that they put on screen, right? But when you go behind the camera, it's a whole different ballgame, because we find that the decision makers really call the shots. So as a Black crew member, you find yourself on an all-white crew representing and carrying the torch for all other Black crew members and crew artists, right? And it's really a very heavy burden to carry, just because at that point you are not exactly making the decisions, and you can only but try to show your worth, and that would kind of like hopefully sway their perception, so that next time when they are putting a crew together, they're more open-minded to having more Black crew members on board. But definitely it does continue to be very high pressure situations for both crew and actors in the field. And it's really sad that as long as you don't seem to have any financial impact on the project, you're just kind of like a token, right? You're just there to fill a gap. You're just there to really present that global picture, if you will. But then again, it comes back to the whole, what role do you actually portray when you're on screen for those who are in front of the screen? You're either guard number one, or guy who gets hit by the car, or something like that, right? Or a robber, star robber, something, those kind of roles, right? There's nothing really substantial to show the realities of the world. We have Black professionals in very high places. We have top medical professionals that are Black, scientists and all that, and we don't get to see that. We have so many medical procedural shows on TV. How many of them have Black doctors, right? So it just goes a long way to show that there needs to be that conscious change, and hopefully the change has begun. Just over the last couple of years, precisely COVID, there's been that rebirth and need and drive for Black creators and Black producers, and hopefully this is just a stepping stone for all of us.
I'm sorry, if I may just add to what everyone else has said. I think that another important thing, in addition to doing your best and proving your worth and value, is building relationships too, because there's so many people you meet on set, and who knows what the future holds, right? The person who you think is the assistant production manager or something today, they might be the producer tomorrow. And just building relationships with people so that as you grow, like there's y'all grow together, you know? And so if they have a positive relationship with you or a positive memory of you, they can be like, oh yeah, Omata is a fabulous actor. He can absolutely do that role. And, you know, building relationships and networking, even if you're just the rubber number 2 or villager number 3, like whatever you are on set, like I think building relationships is also a very good way to go in terms of making sure that more people and, you know, you come back again maybe, or, you know, you're able to just bring more people of color together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that relationship piece is so important. Now, Sarah, you had talked about, with issues of representation, that burden that you sometimes feel, and often the burden of the solution, you know, or of driving change or making space for other racialized artists is put on racialized people. So as Black storytellers and creatives, what are your thoughts on that? You know, what are your thoughts on sort of the added weight that's placed on racialized people once white people kind of wake up to the fact that there's an issue? You know, Omada, you talked about how more recently they're kind of like, all right, let's do this, let's get more representation. But then that also can create extra work to those who are already kind of out there and create that extra burden. So what are your thoughts on that? Sarah, I'll start with you since you touched on that. I'm sorry, I'm putting you in the hot seat again.
Man.
It's rough, right?
Talking about pressure.
Yeah. No. I'm just gonna add a little pressure right now. So
the pressure is real. It really is.
Yeah.
And you know, I don't like, people deal with this differently. Some people choose to absolutely ignore it and just do their best and focus on it, because then it might be too heavy to because all right, when I'm doing a work, I like to be as focused as possible, especially when we get to the point where everyone's together and we're actually shooting, or we're actually producing, or we're actually in tech rehearsals, as you know, that happens in theater. You cannot afford to let things like that cloud your judgment, cloud your focus. You cannot afford to lose concentration, and you know, you just cannot afford to not be on point. And so I acknowledge that, unfortunately, the responsibility of creating space for other, like, people of color within the industry, I guess, is put on other Black people, and kind of with the spotlight on them, and just watching every step that they take and seeing how they do, and seeing if, oh, okay, maybe I can invite another Black person. It's unfortunate because, as a friend of mine would say, these systems they are operating the exact way they were designed to operate. Like they are operating to allow for more white people. They're operating in the exact way they were designed to. And so it's not a matter of inviting more Black people into the structure. It's a matter of absolutely breaking down the structure, reconstructing that, and recreating a system that would allow more people of color to thrive, to create, to tell stories, to be heard. And so, yeah, I think that, like, it's unfortunate that, like, individuals are carrying this burden that really is not theirs. I feel like I worked with Jenna Sears once, and she has, like, award-winning plays. I don't know if you know her. She's an awesome theater maker, award-winning. And she wrote her award-winning play because she got tired of being cast as the best friend to the white girl in the play. She got tired of being cast as the sister. You know what I mean? Like, she got tired. And someone told her, write your stuff. Stop complaining. And she's like, you know what? I will write my stuff. And it won awards. Like, now, like, she's it, you know, she's creating and she's still telling stories. And so I feel like one thing that would allow people of color to really gain agency is when we start telling our own stories, and when we start like creating opportunities for ourselves and creating doorways for ourselves and shattering ceilings and making our way, because I believe it's 100% possible. Like if the infrastructure that has been set up for white people to excel is not going to allow us in, we have to build our own, we have to create our own, and just find a way to work together.
Yeah. No, I love that. It's so true. Benny, what are your thoughts on just, that burden and pressure that's often put on racialized folks?
I agree with what Sarah said. Sometimes people handle or people take on burdens that are not theirs in the first place. Because if somebody feels pressure or somebody feels a burden, yes, it's there for sure. But you also have to think about it. Like, let's say, for example, I was a white guy. I come from a poor family. Let's say I'm a Christian. And let's say I am disabled. If I was that kind of person and I went into if I was hired to do a certain job on a film set, I'd probably feel the same pressure that many other people feel as well. So like, for example, somebody might feel, okay, I come from a poor family, maybe I'm not supposed to be here, or maybe, there's all this oppression against Christians, or maybe, I'm disabled, so, maybe this is not, I should not be here. So what I'm trying to say is that different people feel pressure for different reasons, and it's normal, but you can't dwell on it. You can't dwell on it. You just have to get down there, get your hands dirty, and do the job.
Interesting. Omada, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. Handling pressure or taking on the mantle of that pressure is not for everyone, but I keep circling back to the fact that discussions need to be had. Canada, for some peculiar reason, I've come to realize white Canadians shy away from difficult discussions. They don't like to talk about race. They don't like to talk about religion. They don't like to talk about politics, right? And as long as those discussions are not had, there's not going to be any change. Everyone's going to live with their perceptions. If you have some perceptions that Black people are not relatable, you're going to have those perceptions because you do not go out of your comfort zone to have those discussions to dissuade those perceptions that you do have. I'm really tired of hearing the word allies when it comes to white people. We don't need allies, we need accomplices. Allies stand on the side and just watch you, right? Wait for an opportunity to help you if you do need the help, support you if you do need support. And sadly, as an ally, if you do get into trouble, most times nothing is done. No one comes to your aid, right? But if you have accomplices, if you're in a fight, you have someone backing you in that fight. And that's what we need, right? So that's for white people. But for the Blacks, we need to come together at each and every given opportunity, the strength in numbers. So it's really about being aware of who your network is, reaching out, like Sarah said, this industry in particular is one that's built on relationships. And once you have one relationship built, trust me, that would branch out into tons and tons of other arms, right? And through one connection, you find yourself reaching out to a whole bunch of people. So I feel that definitely the burden is there, but it's not for everyone to handle in terms of finding a solution to the burden. A few people kind of like take it upon themselves to try and make a change, make some impact, try and dissuade those perceptions, but it's not for everyone to do. And we need to also accept that and be comfortable in that situation. It's not, don't feel like when you are under pressure, you have to make an immediate change at that point in time. Do your job, do the best you can, and they'll recognize you for that. And in that little instance, you'd find that you may have affected someone's perception in terms of relationship building, and they'll be like, oh, okay, it's not as bad as I thought. what I felt would be the relationship or the interactions is not what I got. And that would make that person a bit more open to work with more Black people in future, right? So yeah, it's a shift from allyship to accomplices, and just being comfortable in the fact that you don't, as a Black artist, have to create a solution for every awkward situation you find yourself in. Just be open to have conversations if they do arise. Never be on the defensive. Just have that cordial conversation to let them know your stance. Try to dissuade whatever misconceptions they have about you. And I think that would go a long way in just kind of like changing the playing field.
I love that. We don't need allies, we need accomplices. So true. Mariah, what are your thoughts on that, burden and that pressure?
Yeah, I definitely feel it. I feel the burden, like, to be successful for other Black creators and filmmakers. I feel the pressure of, like, we have to build this community. Like, I was on a panel for Black History Month, and like we were talking about a film, and I was like the only Black filmmaker, and I had no idea how to reach out to other Black filmmakers or who's a filmmaker in general in the Black community. And I feel that pressure definitely a lot, but I don't take it to heart so much that it weighs down on me. I actually try and use it as motivation, because I would have really loved to see someone, like, when I was a kid, I never saw any successful Black filmmakers. And so for me, I kind of use it as motivation. I want to inspire other Black youth, especially girls, that they can be successful, and that this is a space for them, that they can create great stories and tell great stories, and be present. So although it's a burden, it's almost a blessing. It's part of my story, and yeah, I just really own it, I think. So yeah.
I love that. Jerome.
I've had a lot of different thoughts cross my mind throughout this, but like I hear what everyone's saying, and I think that like there's only so much you can do in your life and with your time, and I don't see how, like, spending too much time on the negativity helps anyone. And you're put in these situations where you're either given the opportunity to educate someone and help them along, or fight with someone to help them see things your way. And in some of these situations, it's up to the other person and whether or not they're recognizing what they're doing is maybe something that you don't think they should be doing, or is kind of like racist. And it's whether or not they're willing to accept that. It's also up to you to decide, is this worth the opportunity that I have here right now? Am I in a position for myself to be able to handle this in a way that doesn't put up barriers for me? Because in my mind, like all these opportunities that we get are essentially auditions. It goes back to having the network and creating those friendships and everything. Anytime you're on set, you don't know who's watching you, who's looking at you. So it's an audition all the time, regardless of your skin color or background or anything like that. But so being able to be in these positions, you have the opportunity to influence people and show that there is a different side. But I think that a lot of it comes down to knowing yourself, knowing the situation that you were in, and knowing who is around you for support. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think you raise a really interesting point about that sort of need to kind of analyze your situation and protect that as well. So we've talked about tokenism, we've talked about responsibility and pressure, and I want to tie that into how that then affects you all as storytellers. For those of you who are in positions to actually be able to tell your own story, arguably you should be able to tell any story that you want. But then we also talked about this sort of weight and responsibility of maybe, oh, I have to make sure I'm actively challenging this stereotype, or I have to make sure I'm making space for that conversation. So how do you balance telling the story you want to tell as a creative, with any of that sort of personal sense of value or maybe, again, responsibility, and how do you make sure that you're telling the stories that you want to tell and not letting that sort of weight get in the way, or do you want it to get in the way? Let's start with Omada.
Well, I think you should actually feel free to allow it get in the way if it does get in the way. A lot of stories till recently that have Black lead characters were told by white people, right? So storytelling is really about the creator. And I think the only problem with stories being told, diverse stories being told by white people is the team that creates the story. If you do have people from that culture in the writing room, most likely your story is going to be more authentic than having an all-white writing room, right? So Black people can as well tell white stories if you have white creators in the writing room. So it's really about the perspective and the angle you're coming from. So that being said, I personally do not have an issue telling stories, be them Black or white, even though so far my stories have been majorly Black-led stories, just because I do, for now, really want to increase the visibility on screen. It's very important that we see ourselves on television, we see ourselves in movies, we see ourselves on stage. My son always refers to people, I've never heard him say the word Black. He says, my skin color, right? And so for him, it's being able to see people who look like him without exactly acknowledging the tone or shade of your skin color, right? So that is kind of like what really pushes me to ensure that representation is out there, so that the next generation, when they come out, they're like, yes, I see myself just like everyone else. I don't feel left out. I see people who have hearing aids just like me. I see people wearing glasses just like me. There's so many different facets, right, that need to be put on screen. And so for me, it's really creating stories that are authentic to Black people in regards our relationship with the world, be that white people, be that Indigenous people, be that wherever you're from, be that Asians, right? So it's really just telling authentic stories, having creators in the writing room that are able to portray those authentic cultures, nuances that are true to those people that you're telling the story about.
Yeah, I love that. Mariah, how about you? How do you balance sort of, telling the story that you want to tell with a responsibility that you might feel to drive the conversation forward?
Yeah, I do feel that pressure of like, oh, I have to, create a Black story, or I have to tell a Black story. Actually, the films that I've been in have been not about Black people, just mostly underrepresented individuals in some kind of circumstance. So what I do as a creator and what fuels me is I basically find these subjects that I relate to in some way. They usually have that feeling of isolation in some way, and be it different situations, I then tell my story kind of through them. So with my latest film, Able, it's about Keisha, and she is a quadriplegic. She lives life in a wheelchair, and she has felt that isolation. So I then tell my story through that. Like, it's her story, but there are aspects of it that I get to tell my story of those feelings of isolation. So that's kind of how I balance it. Although I do want to tell a Black story eventually. I really want to, I don't know, I guess I feel pressured to really get it right. But in the same sense, I just need to sit down and write about it and really maybe take like a deeper look inside of me and see where that storyline is going to weave in. So, yeah.
Totally. Jerome, how about you?
For me, I feel like stories are all about your motivation. Why are you telling this story? And so ultimately it depends on the story and why you're telling it and why you're telling it now. um, I think that that should influence things more than any pressure to try and fit a mold or try to break stereotypes and whatnot, because I think that there's still value, kind of on the, like if you take comedians, for example, kind of their cry out right now where they feel like they can't say anything because everything that they think is funny, everyone else has an issue with or is trying to shut them down for that reason. So I think that there's still value to pushing some of those boundaries and taking some of those stereotypes and, taking them in our own hands to tell a story that doesn't tear us down. So yeah, I think ultimately it comes down to your motivation and why you're telling the story and what the story is.
Yeah, I love that. What, Benny, how about you?
In my case, many of the projects that I've done have involved a lot of products or services. So in that case, it becomes a bit hard to tell a story that is about people of African descent when, let's say, you're filming a car. However, what I do is, when I know that there's somebody who's interested in the filmmaking world, I tell them, hey, come behind the camera. Let's learn about this lens, this camera. This is how you handle a neutral density filter, lighting, electricity, all these things, in the hope that it can spark some interest for those who are just learning about it, or those who are already in the industry, keep going. They can still see, the opportunities. Filmmaking is so broad. Many, many huge movies. Sometimes I tell people, and they're surprised. Many large-scale Hollywood productions tend to hire anywhere between 15,000 and 30,000 people just for one movie, in all sorts of fields: insurance, animation, VFX, catering. Like, it's so broad. So that's one thing I love about filmmaking. It's so collaborative. Anybody can come from any other industry and come and be part of telling a story.
I love that. Awesome. Okay, Sarah, how about you?
Yeah, I hear what everybody has said, and everyone has made such amazing points. Yeah, like going back to what Rome said, intention, 100%. Like, I'm one of those people who I kind of sort of feel some type of way if a white person writes about Black people. I feel some type of way. I just do, because what is your intention behind that? I recently got asked. I came across a script about a white person who wrote about the police brutality in America, about a Black cop who killed a white kid. And it was just this whole thing. And apparently, like, it was received very well in the theater world where it premiered. And I just was like, why did you write this? Like, what was your intention? And so I don't know. I am absolutely still very much growing, and who knows what my thoughts would be about this next week. But right now, I definitely I feel like people should tell stories that they know, because if you don't know and then you're choosing to tell a story, then what is your motivation behind it? Are you trying to spark controversy? Are you trying to just get the money? Is it a trope that has played out a lot and it's a sure bet where if you put your money, people will come and see it? Like, what are your intentions? So for me, intentions are very big. And the stories that I am personally interested in telling are stories. I don't know. I don't really Black stories, because I'm Black. I don't know. I see it that way. But hey, I'm still growing. But yeah, right. Like, the stories I want to tell are like stories about Black people 100%. And also, more than that, like, for me, it always goes further than that. Like, I'm not just Black people, yeah, but there's so much depth to Black people. Like, what is the story about? Like, what is what is the story going to say about the Black person or Black story that you're writing? Like, I feel like you can always dig deeper. And yeah, so yeah, I don't feel boxed up in any way by kind of like the expectations or like the desire to push boundaries or stuff like that. Like I don't worry about that at all, to be frank. Like when I'm writing a script or when I'm drafting ideas for creative projects, like I don't think about it that way. I just think about the story I want to tell. What are my intentions for telling the story, and what exactly do I want the story to say? I think that's also very important.
Awesome. Well,
I just want to quickly jump into something that, sorry, is it Mwabeni? Mwabeni. Sorry.
Yes.
You mentioned something that I think is very key to this entire discussion, because we've kind of talked about how, our opportunities as individuals, but I think the bigger thing is creating those opportunities and helping other creatives realize that there are all these other areas of the industry. We do typically just see the acting side or the directing side, and off the top of my head I can think of like 3 different people I know who are videographers, and they're shooting music videos and stuff like that, but I don't think they've ever been introduced to the film world. I don't think that they've ever had someone come to them and say, have you thought about trying this role, or have you been on this set, have you tried to do these different types of things? And so I think a bigger part of this discussion is how do we open those avenues and introduce them to that world, so that there are people available when those opportunities for the positions behind the camera actually come around. Because a big part of that right now is more than likely the fact that the people who are looking for crew and the people who are looking for directors and whatnot don't know that there are Black individuals who want to be doing those different types of things.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's such an important component. I have tons more questions. I could talk to y'all all night, but I will open it up for any questions from our attendees. We have time for probably about 1 question. We're like running pretty close to the end of the hour here. Looking in, we have none currently. So if nobody from our audience has a question, I will ask a final question, and anyone can just kind of jump in and answer it. So I'm just going to double check. No questions. Okay. Oh, we do have a question. Ooh, we have a couple. Great. Okay, this is good. All right, so we have 1 question from Amy. So Amy asks, speaking to getting more Black people behind the camera, how can local film unions actively recruit Black crew without tokenizing the Black community or looking like they're just trying to fill a diversity quota? Whoever wants to answer that, just jump in. What are your thoughts?
Amy, I'm going to jump on that. I love that question. As much as we have a responsibility as artists and to kind of like uplift each other along the way and carry each other along, I always say that as long as your activities do not impact on the finances of any organization, be that the arts, whatever, the white majority will not give a damn, right? And so that's where having accomplices come into play, because at the end of the day, this is a systemic problem and it can really only be addressed through the same system. There was an incident some time ago when Damnation filmed in Calgary. That was the only time it's ever happened. And I was really very proud of what ACTRA did in Calgary. When Damnation came to Calgary, it was an all-white cast, just tokens of Black people here and there, right? And ACTRA put their foot down. At the time, the late Garrick was, I believe, the vice president. So he actually led that charge, and he was like, this film or this show would not shoot in Calgary if there is no prominent character that's Black. So the creators had to go back, and the lead female character in that show ended up being female, right? So I think that's where places like the unions, I'd say, even casting directors, right, stand their ground and say, yeah, I'm casting for this show, but I noticed that you have 95% white, 5% of Black, and the only 5% are tokenized, right? So it's either you rework this show or you get someone else to do that. It's hard to say because everyone's like, okay, you're taking money out of your mouth, right? But if every single casting director does that, they'll be forced to kind of like make that change. And that pretty much just goes behind the cameras as well. If the unions, because they go through the unions most times, right? If the unions are like, no, you have to have 40% of your crew Black, they'll do it. They'll actually do it because they don't, as long as it's a unionized production, you have to stick by the rules. So once those rules are in place by the unions, it's part of the agreement, everyone's going to stick to it. It's just going to flow naturally, as against trying to make amends and just trying to save face or trying to have that number or fill a quota, right? If it's law, if it becomes law and procedure, everyone's just going to tow the boat and it's going to just happen naturally.
We have a similar question that is kind of tagged on, so I'll let somebody else speak to this, but Faith asks, how can we get past this phase of tokenism? So not necessarily looking at it from a union's perspective, but you know, as an industry, what are your thoughts on that? And again, anyone can just jump in.
We need more people creating the stories. That's it. We need a seat at the table, because as the more producers we have, the more directors we have who can steer the conversation, the more writers we have who can create those stories, you stand a better chance of being able to direct the narrative. And that really just stirs away from tokenism, because if you have Black writers, your characters are going to be strong Black characters, right? You're not going to have that one-off guy who robs the store and is shot at the end of the movie or at the beginning opening scene of the movie, right? And you had your one guy in the movie who was Black, but he died in the first 2 minutes of the movie, kind of thing, right? So it's really about having a seat at the table. We need more creators, we need more writers, producers, directors, DOPs, just the whole 9 yards, right? The whole 9 yards.
I see a few others have unmuted. What are your thoughts?
I have a question there. There's this movie that is in the works. I'm not sure whether they're going to make it or not. It sounds like the whole movie is tokenization.
Explain.
And the movie is the movie that they're planning on making is a Black Superman. And I wonder about that. I'm like, why? Why not just create a whole new universe, a whole new character? Why do you have to have a Black Superman?
Because it's cheaper.
There was a comment in the questions as well about seeing more great movies remade with Black characters, and for me, I want to see more original story. I like, regardless of who's being recast in the story, the fact that they're recreating all these movies right now that were already done, it's like, yeah, we've done that. We've you know, they did what was it, Annie with Jamie Foxx, and it's like, well, why? Like that to me is the epitome of tokenization. It's like, oh, let's give them a Black movie of something that we used to think was only white people, and give them the opportunity to see themselves on screen with a story that's not original. You know, and that to me is exactly the example of who's in the writer's room. Now, there very well may have been a lot of Black people in the writer's room for that, and there may have been a lot of money flowing into pockets, but for me, I want to see more originality. I don't want us to just be, oh, here's something that we were going to remake, and just to appease everyone, we're going to put more Black faces or diverse faces in it. That doesn't answer the question about tokenism. I don't know.
I think that's a really good point. That's a really important point.
I don't think that there's a super succinct answer to that, as much as it is being able to get us, as Amada said, into the room, get more of us visible behind the camera.
Yeah.
I agree. Like I said earlier, I think that like the system is existing exactly how it was built to exist. Like it was built for white people to thrive, and they're thriving. It just is that way. And so that system either has to be reconstructed and redone, as opposed to just bringing Black people, like superimposing Black people or people of color into a system that is designed for them not to succeed. I think that we need to start taking agency of our own stories and start taking agency of our own experiences, and start, building, these tables for ourselves, and telling our stories and doing the things that we want other people to do for us. And so I don't know. I think the question phrased it as a way of asking like, when will the phase of tokenism, I don't know, the phrase, just the phase of tokenism, it made me smile, because I don't think it's a phase. I think it's been happening for the longest time. It will continue to happen. It just is what it is. And I think that until people start taking more agency over their artistry and their work, and start creating, as opposed to waiting somebody to create something and pull you into it, you may never get a three-dimensional character. It may just be one-dimensional, two-dimensional, because the story is not really about you. So how about we create our story where we create robust, well-rounded three-dimensional characters for ourselves, and invite people like us to tell the story properly, right?
Right.
It's all about the money. As long as you're not making the money, the story's about you, and you are bringing the money to the box office, everyone's going to jump on that train. Oh, okay. Yeah. So the Black Panther can make all that money. Let's have the Black Captain America now. So, that kind of thing. I mean, that's where the money is, So it's really about the money at the end of the day. And unfortunately, that's why it's important that we have a seat at the table to tell those stories about Black people in a very positive light, and show them that we can make that money. Since you want the money, we'll give you the money. Just give us a sit at the table and we'll make the money for you.
Yeah, and like Tyler Perry talks a lot. Tyler Perry, do y'all know Tyler Perry? Tyler Perry is, he's an amazing Black filmmaker, and just all around amazing guy. I don't know him. I never met him, but anyway, I bring him up because when you listen to his interviews, and when he talks about like his filmmaking and bringing in Black people and stuff like that, he talks a lot about ownership. He talks a lot about owning what you create. Again, that agency of creating your stories, and that's the thing. People think it won't sell. It will not, like, people think it will not make money until it makes money, and then they're like, wait, how can we be a part of this, right? But by that time, you already arrived there. You're the first at the table, and so you can dictate what roles other people play, right? Anyway.
Yeah, I love that. This is so great. Thank you so much for these great questions and all the feedback. I'll leave it open in case anybody has one last question. But it is about time to wrap up here. And I also want to make sure that nobody has anything else they want to add to any of the amazing points that have been made already. Okay. Awesome. So yeah, thank you all so much. Thank you to all our attendees and all our panelists. This was such an exciting discussion.